There's a few different perspectives on how to close loan, or not just when you're doing mortgage loans, any type of sale where there's a counterparty. And knowing the psychology of persuasion or influence is vital if you're going to be successful. Whether you're selling cars, selling real estate, selling mortgages, selling personal development, whatever it is, you're going to have to know how to influence, overcome objections, and there's a lot of different things. So I brought Joe in today because I want to get your perspective. He's a top producer. I still, there's always a seller and a buyer, like Grant Cardone says. It's either sell or be sold. So knowing what side and understanding that, there's a lot of different ways. And you look at people like Jordan Belfort. Then you have Grant. And then you have a lot of different people that doctors of influence and persuasion. There's a lot of different people. Even
Different philosophies
you
on
could even
sales,
say
yeah.
that. I mean, people, in a sense. I mean, Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey. I mean, they're influencing, they're inspiring. In a sense, they're selling, right?
Absolutely.
Someone's buying into it, and so I kind of want to get like your, like, if you do you have any key bullet points or takeaways for somebody out there, the viewers? What are the top tenets on how to close and influence and sell?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to recognize, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah,
Always good.
yeah, absolutely.
Always good. First of all, we have to recognize that we are always selling or we're being sold. Most people that tell me I don't really like sales, it's because they're always being sold. They're trying to sell you on the fact that they don't like sales. And I'm, for one, I'm not going to be the one that's going to buy into the fact, because I believe we all are in sales. And I think by definition, sales is, to me, moving someone's perspective on a thing without having them lose their dignity in the process. Because you don't want to just move someone from one perspective to another, because if they feel like they're losing their dignity in the process, you're not going to, it's going to bring forth objections that you're not going to be able to overcome. So you don't want to make someone feel bad for having one stance that now you're moving them through your persuasion to another stance, and another mental stance. We are always doing this. All of us are convincing someone of something. My son is always trying to convince me to drive the car every chance he gets. And he's a great salesperson, because most often he's gotten the keys and he's doing it. So I think the first thing, to answer the initial question, is we have to recognize that we're always in the sales environment. And the art of selling is the art of persuading.
Okay.
It's not what a lot of people think it is, though. It's not like it's a...
Oh, that's what I was going to ask, because you're saying move from point A to point B without affecting their morale. So that's what I want to know. How do you do that?
Well, I think the best way to do it is to be as tuned in to their needs as possible. We call it everyone's most favorite radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me, right? Great acronym. And it's truthfully knowing what that person's hot buttons are, as we used to say. What's going to move this person? For instance, if I want something from Angelo Christian, I have to know what motivates Angelo Christian.
Right.
And then I have to tune into that radio station, into that frequency, and I have to speak from that perspective.
Okay.
And we talked about this before, that it's important that you know that people have different personalities.
Right.
And we have a color code for personalities.
Right.
That's important to know. And if you're with someone that's a red who is motivated by money, you want to speak in that frequency, or otherwise you might be saying a lot of eloquent words that doesn't resonate with that person.
Right.
And someone else may be a yellow, where they're more caring and they're almost like the Mother Teresa mentality. You have to speak to their, to their desires to motivate them to even move from where they are to where you want them to be. So I think the first thing that you have to do is know who you're talking with. And it's an art to that. It's not something you'll get by talking to one person a day. You're going to have to really put in some time to know how to communicate with someone. And know what their motives are, and then know how to move them from where they are now to where you want them to be.
Now, how would you say, like, as far as a scale of 1 to 10, how important is tone?
Oh, it's very important. I would say it would probably be 10.
Wow.
Tonality is so important. And think about this, Angelo. A lot of times we're conducting, at least initially, we're conducting a sale over the phone. They may not be able to see your smile. So what do we have to do?
Yeah.
We have to put a smile on
Yeah.
our face, put a
Yeah.
smile on our voice,
Yeah.
because it literally changes our tone. If I'm sitting like this and I'm talking like this, my tonality is self-defeated. It's exhausted. Whereas when I do this, my diaphragm is expanded, and when I'm speaking, I'm projecting my voice, and I sound a whole lot more confident.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the tone really, it's literally a language that people can tune into, in spite of the words that are coming out of someone's mouth. The tone in which they're speaking can speak to confidence or a lack thereof. It can speak to a point, if you're confident in your tonality, I have a greater assurance. It's like going to a doctor, and if I think that doctor is unsure, I feel a little antsy about his
Yeah.
working on my body.
Yeah.
But if he seems pretty assured, especially if there's in the face of a diagnosis, I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable by his tone
Yeah.
and how comfortable he feels recommending maybe a what do you call it, a treatment
Yeah.
for that situation.
I got a question on about this for you. So a lot of and I think we even talked about this with some of the guys on the floor, that there's a difference between Jordan Belfort and Grant Cardone. And a lot of critics of I love Grant's one. We follow him. He's huge. And so but a lot of people, like for example, will say that he strong arms the sale and has a very aggressive way on how to close and how to sell. And basically, and if you hear a lot of the way that he trains and stuff, a lot of his people, it seems like they're he says first off that tone and mirror and matching doesn't matter. It's crap. Whereas Jordan on the other side says that's vital, right? That's what Tony Robbins says. Mirror and matching is very, very important. And tone. Grant says that's not that important. A lot of critics of Grant will say that and Jordan Belfort assured that, hey, listen, there's three different types of yes that a customer will give you. There's the counterfeit yes, there's the confirmation yes, and then there's a commitment yes. And a lot of people say that probably when they're dealing with a very aggressive salesperson, they're just getting a counterfeit yes just to move the conversation along, but they're not committed as a buy-in. And so so I want to kind of see what your thinking is on that, because I've been studying a lot with the psychology of influence and persuasion, and a lot of people most people lean towards, and they're a huge advocate of tone, and mirror and matching, like you had mentioned before. If you're dealing with a very successful banker, you have a different approach. If you're dealing with someone that is very social, you're going to have a different approach. So what do you have any opinion on this?
Yeah, first of all, I think whatever works for, because Grant is a bulldog.
Yeah, he is.
And it works for him.
Yeah.
Now, what I learned, and I guess I'm still in that stage of learning, that one person's philosophy may not always work for another person. I'm one that believes that mirroring and matching has its place in this whole thing, because again, I believe that people listen and they tune in. Not so much they listen, but they tune in, and it resonates on a certain frequency. And if you're not speaking in that same frequency, not just by the words you're speaking, but oftentimes by the way you're speaking them.
Right.
Some people, for instance, are more aggressive.
More aggressive.
And if I'm a more aggressive type of person, if I go into a clothing store and someone's being aggressive with me, I think there's a 50-50 chance that it's either going to resonate in the positive way. Because I can say, I like this guy, he's like me. Or it might be where it might be a total turnoff. It could possibly be a total turnoff that this guy is coming because now his aggression, guess what, it could happen. It could meet my aggression. And aggression meeting aggression in that type of environment may not always serve that salesperson. Now, that's just one person's perspective. Okay. It may not serve that salesperson. So I believe even for instance, if I run into a situation where I meet a very aggressive person, I have to take control and seize control of that conversation.
Seize control. Okay.
Have to seize control. And, again, one of the ways that I do that, I ask a question and I diffuse that aggression.
Okay.
It has to be done.
Okay.
Because if it isn't, then my mirroring and matching him, and he's aggressive, I'm aggressive. That may not always work.
All right, so
You
that's
follow what I'm saying?
yeah. So that's one of my. You brought up a very good point. You said you ask a question. So, and I think pretty much any sales philosophy that I'm sure you've studied or I've studied, information gathering, fact finding is one of the hallmarks
Absolutely.
of effective selling.
Absolutely.
So now, because what you're doing is because whoever and you tell me what you think about this, the best salespeople is the active listener,
Absolutely.
right? Whoever's really listening the most is the one that's in control. But they put off the personification to the counterpart, that they're in control, the other side, because they're the ones doing the talking.
Right.
But in reality, these calibrated questions are steering them to the direction
Absolutely.
that you want them to go.
Yeah, we have a closing technique that I refer to as the Miranda rights. You ask a certain question, and every answer they give us can and shall be used to close you on this deal. That's the Miranda rights.
Okay.
You know, so the important thing is asking the right kinds of questions.
Right.
Because again, I've heard that philosophy that the one who's doing all the talking is in control, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
Especially when you know that what they're doing is answering a question that someone who was in control, and they seize control by the question that they ask. It made that person open up and start giving information. And that information
Right.
that I'm gathering information,
Right.
not so much just to say, so I can close you, but so I can help solve your issue. Now, you can call it closing, or you can call it solving
Yeah,
issues.
well, yeah. I mean, that's what we're doing, right? I mean, and so now, have you seen a lot of salespeople like you talked about the bulldog that's very aggressive? Because every sales great person I've studied, I don't know. I think Grant is a big advocate of that too. But we go back to the active listening. But I've seen a lot of salespeople. They just yap,
Yeah.
and they're not even letting the customer
Right.
participate. And so, do you think that the customer, if they see that could turn them off,
Absolutely.
and also they just gave the pitch, they blurted out all the benefits of the program or the product, and the customer is just like dismayed, doesn't want to do anything, and it's kind of shut down. We've
Right.
worked with some people
Oh
like
yeah.
that, and so
Absolutely.
so I guess my question is that how important is it to just bite your tongue and just listen?
Man, that's probably the toughest thing for a new, unseasoned salesperson to be able to do, is to know when to not speak. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we call it diarrhea of the mouth, man. They just start, throwing all this stuff out there, and I think that's a sign of being amateuristic, though, when you think about it. And a buyer, especially a sophisticated buyer, can pick up on that, because we used to call it with this other company I worked at. They called it feature bombing, meaning that they went in and just started bombing them, throwing all the features at them, but not understanding that people don't buy based on features. People buy based on perceived benefit. They buy on what does this mean to me? Not so much what it means to you, because what it means to you is this gadget that does this, that, and the other. But if you don't tie that functionality to something that means something to me, again, tuning into my radio station, there is no value being built by a bunch of words going out your mouth.
Right.
And a lot of new people, new to the industry or new to sales, period, don't understand that. They've been told, I have a gift for gab.
Yeah.
And that, to be honest with you, that's one of the, I hate that term.
Yeah.
Because just because you can articulate or be eloquent doesn't make you a good salesperson.
Right.
Because I know some very silent assassins, man. They don't speak a lot.
Yeah.
But when they do speak,
Yeah.
they ask questions first of all.
Yeah.
And they get the other person talking. But when it's time for them to speak, their words are so potent that it moves that person or reaffirms to that person. I was thinking the same thing. This guy is not an adversarial position with me. He's actually making me feel good about the decision that I've already made because he made it already.
And you mentioned right there, you said feel. So would you agree that we're all emotional beings, and that emotion is what drives a lot of decision making?
A lot of it is emotional. It's a lot of, and that's a great question, because I believe that there's like ongoing misunderstanding that women are emotional and men are logical. But when it comes to buying or making a decision on something, it's in most instances it is an emotional sales.
Right.
Sales is an emotional thing. It's sometimes, if you logically look at it, you didn't need that Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, you wanted it bad enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you try and go on logic alone, it doesn't work. You gotta tie into and tap into someone's emotions in order to get them to move. That's the best way to do anything. Right. Absolutely.
No, I agree completely. And so, I guess some of the key takeaways for people watching this today is, I guess we'd say, is active listening.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be a great listener.
Mm-hmm.
Have calibrated questions that are going to take the counterpart to the direction that you want to go. And then we talked about as far as your tone.
Mm-hmm.
Tone is vital. So, in my opinion, like, for example, I've tested it both ways with tone. And if somebody comes at me that's very arrogant and a bulldog, I don't want to buy from someone like that. And so I'd rather, for me personally, deal with someone that has a very empathetic tone.
Mm-hmm.
With empathy. I think that that's a huge thing when you're talking to people, especially if you're selling a house or a very big ticket thing. Empathy. I'm not saying sympathy. I'm saying empathy towards their situation.
Mm-hmm.
And because you think about when you're talking to somebody and you come across empathetically, they have a higher probability to hear you and let it pass through the impenetrable forest of your mind to get into the emotion. If it comes out like a dart, it's just going to go right past them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you see what I'm doing with my voice right now, I'm slowing it down. I'm trying to stay very calm. And I think this is a huge thing for selling.
Mm-hmm.
Is you have to be in control of your emotions and in control, because I mean, sometimes we get these calls, these people, they're millennials, first-time buyers, and they'll just blurt out all this information. Hey, you're not going to run my credit, and you're going to ruin my credit score, and I've been shopping for this loan, and now I just want, I want to buy this house over here, Joe. Now I want to go over here. And what's your rate, Joe? And what about the closing cost, Joe? And this lender said that he does an Experian. You pull all three. Is it a soft inquiry? And you're like, hey man,
slow down.
It's all good, brother. So how do you? And so how sometimes you're like, because if you jump on that train with him, then your brain's going to be going right.
We have a thing that we refer to, Angelo, as we want to slow down that we might speed up. We want to get you to where you want to go, which is ultimately buying a home that you and your family can feel very proud of.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have to slow down because it's important to get all that information out. It's important to know what the other lenders have said to you and all of that. But understand, now that you're, sitting in front of me, I can't be held accountable for what the other lender might have told you. I'm going to do my best to put together a program or have a program situated for you to get you in the quickest, most shortest point from A to B as possible. And sometimes we have to just slow the whole conversation down, that we might speed the process up. And most people, when they hear it like that, they appreciate it because they are, again, it's an emotional buy.
Right.
The bigger the buy, the more emotion. So this is the biggest buy in most people's experience. So they're very emotional, but you can't get emotional with them.
Right.
You have to be the calming force. Can you imagine going to a doctor and the doctor is talking about a malignancy and the patient is freaking out, so the doctor freaks out with the patient? He's got to be, or she has to be, a very calming voice. And then once they slow the emotions down, they'll speak something that's going to help direct that person. It might be malignancy, but it's not stage 4.
Yeah.
There is still a 98% chance you'll live a long, healthy life.
Right.
And once that information comes, it calms the whole situation down. Sometimes we have to be that way when we're talking to clients.
And then you think that when you're being calm like that, because if you're actively listening, then you're going to know how to organically respond, as opposed to just having in your mind what you want to say. You listen to what they say. So when you respond to something that is going to be impactful because you've listened so well, as opposed to just holding your thought in your mind and blocking out what they're saying. Right? Because if you listen very well, that's how you're going to persuade them, because now you understand where they're coming from, because it's you've let it resonate in your mind. Your brain will show you how to respond to them because now you understand the situation.
Right.
Whereas a lot of salespeople, they just let the person talk, but then they're just thinking in their mind, I got to close him. This is USDA. It's zero down. So they've totally blocked out what the person said.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so one last thing I was going to ask you on mirror and matching. I mean, how like, can you give me an example? Like, let's say that I'm a high-level executive, and I speak with a lot of confidence, and I have a downward tone. How would you match mirror me?
Well, and that's a great question as well, because I believe it's important that if I'm talking with someone, for instance, and I don't want to assume, but if I'm talking with someone and I find that they want to buy a $500,000 home, and they earn a six-figure income, they work a high-profile job. With someone like that, I think the first thing I'm going to do is ask a question, and I'm going to listen to how they respond. Because here's the thing about mirroring and matching: you want to know, you don't want to assume. Because I know some people who make a whole bunch of money and they're loosey-goosey with their conversation. So you don't want to assume by what you see on paper. You want to engage that person the same every time, which is being cordial, introducing yourself, and then learn to ask qualifying questions. And once you ask that question, and it has to be an open-ended question if you want to ascertain something about their personality. And once you hear how they respond and you listen to what they're saying, then you can now, I like to match the tone, even if I'm talking with you right now. Okay, it's two ways we can do this. We can do it strictly by audio, which is over the phone, or it could be physically, because that's another thing that we don't talk about.
Right.
We don't talk enough about if you're sitting up straight like this, it's going to cause me to do the same. I'm mirroring you.
Yeah.
If you talk with your hands, I may find myself talking with my hands.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, because that's what you're toned into that.
Right.
If you don't talk with your hands, one thing I'm going to have to learn to do is not do that if that's not what you're doing. And I notice you don't talk with your hands.
Yeah.
So what I'll do now to mirror you, I'll do the same thing. It's not going to be so obvious and so overt that you're saying this guy's trying to look like me. He's trying to move. No. It's a subtle thing. Because I believe that sales and success in sales is full of subtleties. It's just a subtle tone, a subtle change to the tone, a subtle change to how you're communicating. It's not like it's a big overt change to how you're doing things. Most of the times, it's something that's real small that the average person won't pick up on by thinking about it, but the subconscious picks up on it just like that. You see what I'm saying? So even with you right now, I'm talking with you. What I'm going to do, I'm going to talk in a certain tone, and I'm going to keep my hands still because I noticed that when you're talking, first of all, I noticed it. Now I'm going to respond to what I noticed. You don't speak with your hands. So now when I'm talking with you, I'm going to do exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'll do it in such a way that you don't see me mirroring you.
Yeah.
But what it does happen subconsciously is you're saying, he's like me. We're on the same level.
Yeah.
We're talking on the same level.
Yeah.
An executive who owns their own business and has certain expectations, I have to meet those expectations.
Right.
You know, last point I'll make with that, a lot of it has to do with your tone, your appearance, your speech pattern. I was told years ago there's a reason why Dan Rather, if you remember that guy, he was a newscaster for NBC, I believe, Peter Jennings, and the other guy from the other network, they all dressed the same.
Okay.
They all had on dark suits, white shirts, and a pale yet bright tie. Not bright, but a colorful tie. The reason they all dressed the same was because of the expectation of the audience, because they did a poll and they said that people have an expectation of what this person is supposed to look like who's bringing this kind of information to me.
I see.
You see, so the anchor man has to dress a certain way. He has to carry himself a certain way, not because of his own personal idiosyncrasies, but because of his audience's expectation. I took that to say, it's the same way when it comes to our clients. They're expecting a certain persona, a certain level of professionalism, a certain tone. And we gotta exceed what their expectations are. And I fear that a lot of times people can't close larger loans because they're not mirroring and meeting the expectation of that
right
of that professional.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I guess we shouldn't have someone like John Candy probably doing the news that comes out.
He doesn't
in a beach shirt.
No, man, it doesn't meet the expectation.
It doesn't meet the expectation. Yeah,
of the viewer.
I had a customer the other day, and I must not have mirrored him. He said, "Man, he called me back and said, I said, hey, well, how come? What happened? You were not moving forward with the loan?" He says, "Man, I've never seen anyone talk like you. That's a banker." And I was like, "Well, dude, you're a truck driver." And he started laughing.
Right.
And then he sent his documents in, and I got him to laugh. But he's like, "Man, I've never heard of a guy that's a banker that calls people brother."
Well,
And I was like, "What do you?" Well, it's like, "Well, I don't work for Wells Fargo, man."
Right.
So
right.
And
that's again, those are so many. There are so many different subtleties that what works on this end may not be the best here.
Yeah.
Because I agree with what you're saying as well. Sometimes we are too uptight, and that's not good either.
Yeah.
So
it was interesting. But no, guys, this is really good. This is very good information. I hope you guys like this. This will be on our YouTube. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show,
always, man. For sure.
This is another great edition of Real Estate Insider. You can follow Joe on his Facebook. What's your Facebook page?
I'm actually Joseph Cup of Joe Humphrey. They call me Cup of Joe.
Cup of Joe, yep.
And I'm on Facebook. Sometimes doing Facebook Live where we're talking about anything and everything that's going to help you be better as a person, for sure.
Yeah, so you can follow him. You can also follow me, Angelo Christian Mortgage. Please leave your comments down on the YouTube down here if you want to see anything or have any ideas about selling or closing. These are the things that we've done over the years, and it's helped us to influence and inspire other people. You can also follow us on Instagram. We come out every single day with great content live. So this is another great edition of Real Estate Insider. We'll be back tomorrow with some more great information. Take care, guys, and peace out.
God bless.